According to an August 2022 study released by the Yale Program on Climate Change Communications, it found that 64% of Americans believe they're at least somewhat worried about global warming and climate change. Additionally, another 30% of Americans say that they're very worried about the future of climate change and how it will affect America at large. 65% of Americans believe that global warming will eventually harm them and their families. Beth McDaniel is on the front lines on the fight against climate change. She's the president of one of the leading carbon capture coating companies in the world. She also serves as a client technology advisor to some of the top environmental NGOs, technology accelerators, and Washington, D.C. embassies. McDaniel believes that addressing climate change is an urgent matter and one which we all should take a vested interest in trying to solve. She joined me this week to have a conversation about her revolutionary technology that she helped to develop with her husband, the future and current state of climate change, and what we can all do together to get our skin in the game to make a dent in this sizable issue and make our world a cleaner and safer place in which to live, work, and play. I don't want you to miss any of this valuable information, so without further delay, I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Take a moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to learn how you are contributing to the fight against climate change and a little bit about your personal journey as well. Great to see you this afternoon, and thank you so very much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. Now, Beth, I know as a C-suite executive and an attorney and a businesswoman, you know a thing or two about women's empowerment and really what it means to be successful in business in today's society. So my first question to you is, when you look at business empowerment and succeeding in business in today's 21st century, what do you think of? What comes to mind for you?
So what comes to mind for me about women in business?
Women in business and women empowerment, yeah.
You know, I guess I've always felt a sense of equality. I mean, not that I've always been treated equally, but I've always felt like women can do anything that anyone else can do. It's not a gender specific thing to be successful or to be a leader. And so but I do like seeing women growing in leadership, and that our society has become more open to women leaders. In my case, my husband was the innovator of our technologies, and I kind of stepped into a president mode because we are a closely held company, and so I kind of stepped into a leadership position. I've had leadership positions elsewhere too throughout my life, but in this case, it was more of a family business, and I was doing what I had to do. Sometimes as a leader, you're leading other people. Sometimes you're taking out the trash. Sometimes you're you're doing whatever has to be done to get the job done. And I think women are just as capable as doing that as anybody else. So I don't really see that much of a distinction.
Yeah, absolutely. And Beth, I know that we're connected today because you have a climate change technology that you are bringing to the world in your vision to fight climate change. So I'm wondering if you can tell me all about the technology and the importance about fighting climate change from your perspective.
Yeah, sure. This is something that for years we have been in the business of developing this technology, and I've been studying climate change for quite some time. And it kind of helps maybe to step back and talk about climate change, to talk about the sheer size of the problem of what we're facing as humanity, is trying to face this existential crisis that we're in. A lot of people don't realize what it is. So if I could put some numbers to it, it might help your audience, relate to it a little bit more. So for instance, nature is a really balanced system. Okay. In the ocean, for instance, there's about 360 gigatons of CO2 that's released from like algae and stuff in the ocean. And then also that same ocean will pull down about the same amount, or a little bit more. Okay. The ocean's even a little bit better. So the ocean is pulling down CO2, and at the same time, it's also releasing CO2 when things die and such like that. But it's balanced. It's pretty much balanced. Same with the terrestrial CO2 is like from trees and vegetation, lichen and such. What we find is that there's about 85 gigatons of CO2 a year, and a gigaton is a billion tons. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. Okay, but the trees and vegetation, the terrestrial land, the land is emitting CO2 and also pulling down CO2 in a pretty equalized way. The problem that we face is what happened when humans came along after the post-industrial revolution and started emitting about, right now we're emitting about 37 gigatons a year into our atmosphere of CO2. Okay, there's nothing to balance that out. All right, so we are in excess 37 billion tons annually. Okay, call it 40 billion. But let's talk a minute about what a billion tons is. Okay, what this really is. For instance, 1,000,000 days ago, okay, was 2,740 years. Okay. So we're talking about 700 BC. 1,000,000,000 days ago was 2,740,000 years ago. Okay. That's humans didn't even, Homo sapiens didn't even come into existence until 200 to 300,000 years ago. So we're talking about gigatons. That's 1 billion. Okay. And we are emitting almost 40 billion tons annually. Now, you hear a lot from, industry about now, because people are starting to be much more aware of the breadth of the situation and what we need to do. And you hear, large companies are working on being green and going green and looking for alternative sources of energy, all this, and mitigating their emissions. And all of that is good. But we're still emitting 37 billion tons now. Okay. And so it's still a huge problem. So what's happened is the International Panel on Climate Change, which is, a United Nations panel made up of thousands of scientists worldwide, has come up with, various reports, and that's what we keep on hearing about. And they've recognized that mitigation, or just cutting back on emissions, is not going to do the trick. Okay. because what we're going to do is we're going to pass up a point of no return with where we're going to have extreme weather, more extreme weather events. We're already in there, okay? But we're going to have much more extreme weather events. We're going to have loss of species, loss of coral reefs in the ocean, and even loss of big species, okay? I mean, it's a huge issue, and it's in our lifetime, all right? I mean, we're the adults in the room. Anyway, but what the IPCC in the last few years has recognized is that instead of just mitigating emissions, cutting them back, we're going to have to pull down emissions. We're going to have to actually remove CO2 from the atmosphere in order to achieve our goals of not passing up a point of no return where we can't turn it back anymore. And that therein lies where our technology comes in. Ours is a carbon removal technology. And I'll stop here if you have any questions. I don't want to just ramble on.
Yeah, and I know that you also wanted to talk about the peer review white paper that was just released. So I'll give you the platform to do that as well.
Yeah, no, of course. I'll tell you a little bit about about our technology and where we're going with this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we are in my husband and I started a company about 20 years ago in the paint innovation business. Okay. So you probably didn't expect to hear that, but paint might save us all. Okay. It's the biggest industry that no one's ever really thought about. And what we do in our day job is we take biological things and put them into paints and coatings, like biological organisms, and put them into paints and coatings and ask them to function in some sort of way. Up until now, paint has just been used to either decorate a surface, with your butterfly yellow or butterfly pink color or whatever, or protect a surface. But what we wanted to do was we saw in nature there are things like enzymes and peptides that have a function in nature that do something, and that's not our innovation, that's nature. And what we like to do is what our science is we've taken those organisms and trained them in a coating system, and asked them to do what they do in nature, but in a paint. And that way we can spread that paint over surfaces and it becomes like a canvas for functionality. So I'll give you an example. An example would be like an enzyme. We use an enzyme a lot in our coating system that breaks down greases, fats, and oils. Okay. It does that in nature. What we know how to do is put that in a paint and let it do that in the paint. And so if you put it on your computer screen, it'll break down your fingerprints on your computer screen. If you put it in your kitchen, it's going to continue. It's enzymatic. So it's going to continuously do this in the paint. All right. And that's our context for what we do. We work with peptides and enzymes and those kind of things, and make them do something in the paint that people want them to do. It might be antimicrobial. Okay. It might keep your surfaces safe from spreading COVID, for instance. In this case, the case of the paint, our carbon capture coatings is what we call them. We took an organism, an algae, and trained that into a paint. And what we know from our 8th grade science is algae photosynthesizes just like trees, right? It pulls down CO2 with the help of sunlight and water in the atmosphere, and it pulls down CO2, and then it releases oxygen and glucose through photosynthesis. And so we look to nature because we always look to nature in our innovations. And we saw something. Actually, my husband saw this. It was kind of his aha moment. He's a biochemist and crazy scientist guy, and he was doing a scientific mission in the Arctic, and saw a rock that was brightly colored, bright red, He thought it was like, a geotag or something, like some kind of paint. And then when he saw it, he went over and he saw that that was actually lichen. Now we've all seen lichen. We go, out in the woods or whatever, and you see lichen on rocks, and you can't even scrape it off, right? And it's brightly colored, all different colors. And he thought, that's like paint, and that's our business. So we started looking at lichen as a solution. Now, lichen is a combination of two different organisms, a fungus and an algae. The algae photosynthesizes and pulls down CO2, while the fungus protects the algae and allows it to get all of the things that it needs, the nutrients, the gases, allows sunlight in, but not too much UV, allows humidity to come in, that sort of thing. And so that's why some lichen can grow to be 1,000 years old. And so it works very well in nature. And so that was the genesis of our paint, is we said, let's make it like lichen. And so we put algae into a paint. And one thing we know how to do is we know how to work with paint to make it do different things. And so we know how to put things in paint to allow it to absorb sunlight, but not too much UV. We do that all the time. We know how to put things in paint that make it absorb water. So we can give it the elements that it needs, and it ends up that, wow, the paint can pull down CO2. And then what we need to do is just cover a whole bunch of surface area with that paint to do the work of photosynthesis, so that it will pull down CO2, fix it in the paint until we're ready to take it and do something permanent with it, so that that CO2 never escapes back into the atmosphere.
Well, thank you for that thorough explanation and the good work that you do, Beth. And I'm also curious to ask you on a more broader scale, Beth, how do you believe people should view climate change? Because for many people, whatever side of the coin you're on, they know that climate change is a real issue. All you have to do is look what's happening out west in California with the weather, and you can see that climate change is playing a part. So on a more broader scale, how important do you think people should take climate change on a more broader scale?
I think it's the most important issue that we face. We don't want to be the end of humanity. And look, I don't want to depress all your listeners, okay? But we are facing a very real situation. And right now, for instance, I think a lot of people have it in their head that, people are cutting back and they're doing their part, and they're recycling, and these companies are cutting back on emissions, and they think, without knowing more, that it's being done. The problem is it's not being done to the scale at all that we need. So for instance, I was talking about carbon removal technologies, right? That we need carbon removal, not just cutting back and mitigating our emissions, but we need to actually have something that just pulls down CO2. That's what this technology is. It can also be a mitigation technology, but it's also a direct air capture. The technologies that are out there doing this, the best technology that's out there right now, or the one that's furthest along, is what's called a sorbent technology, and it's a company called Climeworks, and they're probably most well known, but they're only doing that at 4,000 tons a year so far. Okay, and I just showed you, kind of the difference between 1 million and 1 billion. We're only at 4,000. So we're not taking care of the problem yet. We're not at all there. All of us, our kids and our grandkids, are in jeopardy right now. And we have to come together and find some solutions. And so, if you ask me what is the deal? Well, I think it's the most important issue we face today.
Yeah, absolutely. And Beth, just before I ask you about addressing the UN, I'm also I'm curious to ask you about, for everyone watching or listening to this who wants to take incremental steps on addressing climate change, what are some steps that the layman person can take that can really add their voice to the fight against climate change, in your opinion?
It's a very good question. And I wish I could say, you're going to make a difference. I drive an electric car. Okay. And I believe in that. I wish it would make a kind of difference. It's not going to, even if everyone drove electric cars, unfortunately, it's not going to make the difference that we need. Okay. So what we need, in my opinion, is go to your lawmakers, go to your companies, your large companies, and demand that they do something big. It's got to be a big effort. And so I know that you'd probably like me to say, like it would help if you rode your bike every day to work or school, and it's not doing any damage, but it's not, what we need is big scale things. And so we need governments, we need huge companies to take the lead and make some real dramatic changes in what they're doing, and investments in our future, and investments in carbon removal, frankly.
Yeah, it's a boat where everyone has to be rowing in the same direction, right?
Yeah, especially the big players and the big countries in our country. And so I would say call your lawmaker and demand it.
Yeah, when you're in a position of power and leadership, you have to use it, right?
Mm-hmm. They answer to us. They should care.
Absolutely. And Beth, I know that you also addressed the UN and the Europe embassy on the issue of climate change. So tell me about that experience and what difference or what you were hoping to get out of that experience, and whether you thought it was effective as well.
The issue, I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question. My headphones were cutting out for a second.
No problem. I was just asking you about addressing the UN and that experience.
Oh, the UN. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and how that went for you, and whether you believe it made a difference, and what you were hoping the message that you conveyed got across. So tell me about that experience.
Yeah, you know what? I think we got our lines crossed a little bit. So we didn't address the UN, but we have done some National Press Club work, okay, and with other countries that are also trying to find big solutions to this. So yeah, it wasn't exactly directly to the UN. We're taking direction from the UN. UN is like I said, this international panel on climate change, everyone should be listening to them. That is the foremost authority on climate change. And so they're already there. And what we're trying to do is, promote not only our technology, but we see everyone who's out there trying to do something about this problem as colleagues. They're not competitors. And there's plenty of space in this space for all of us to act and to do well and to make a difference. And so, that's what we're trying to do, is promote people and big companies and countries to do stuff. But we haven't been before the UN. Well, sorry for the misunderstanding.
Yeah, no, thank you for the clarification. And I also wanted to ask you about the importance of getting more young people interested in the field of science and technology and climate change, and how important is it, in your opinion, to get younger people interested in this as a career, and how big of a help do you think it would be if we got young people invested in this line of work?
Well, I mean, young people are the people who have the most to lose, and I'm always apologizing to my kids and to my young people about because in my generation, that's when really arose, like we really understood what the problem was. And so I feel like our generation didn't do enough. And the young people have more of a stake in this outcome than even, adults. And I think they care a whole lot more, and they see the problem. And science, getting into science and technology, well, first of all, it's just fun. Okay. I mean, and it's interesting. And there's so much, especially like in nature, that we can do that, is already, we can learn from nature and utilize that to create solutions for these big existential problems, and like what we did, our technology just generally is at the intersection of several different disciplines. But you take like material science, that's the paint part, and mix it with biology, and then you have what we do. And so I think that people will start mixing things up, to really find good solutions. But we need science, we need scientists, and we need young, strong minds, to help us out of this dilemma.
Yeah, absolutely. And Beth, as you may know, that March is also National Disability Awareness Month. And, Beth, I was born with what's called spastic quadriplegic cerebral palsy. It simply means that I don't have enough oxygen in my legs to walk normally. And outside of hosting this podcast, I also work with organizations to amplify the hiring of individuals like myself who have a disability. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on, with your experience in business, how much of a competitive advantage is it to infuse folks with disabilities into the workforce, and how important do you think months like this are to acknowledge the contributions of folks with disabilities in the workforce?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's kind of like, well, like what we talked about with women. I don't really see, people with disability can contribute just as much or more to, finding solutions as anybody else. And I've always felt like good leadership means you have to have passion and compassion, and everyone has a voice, and you lift people up and they'll do a great job. And so I think it's, really important to reach out to different communities, to the disabled community. It's very important, for instance, in climate change, to make sure that whatever you're doing, it has a social justice impact, that we're recognizing people who might be affected negatively by it, or people who are not being considered in the overall income. And we have to raise everybody up to the same level and get everyone involved. And we need great minds. And so I just think, we could find that in the disabled community, and we could find that in disadvantaged communities, all over the world. So I don't know if I answer your question quite right, but I mean, we actively definitely take a role in that. And I worked in human rights for, and I didn't get paid to do it. It was just something that I did, but in human rights. And so everything that we do in our technology always has a human right component, and an equality component. And we have to make sure that everyone is living up to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Beth, based on the technology and what you do to fight against climate change, I'm curious to ask you about the future of climate change and where you think that's going, and how more emphasis on this issue can also improve our quality of life as well.
Well, it depends on the tactics that we take. Okay. I mean, there are certain, I'm most familiar probably with climate change solutions. Okay. So that's kind of the background of what the context from which I'm answering your question. There are certain solutions that are going to be better than others for society and, for humanity and for community and that sort of thing. And so I think it's, for instance, I hope I'm not straying too much for your question.
No, of course not.
Just bring me back if I am. But there's a lot of climate change solutions that in the carbon removal world, for instance, that require injecting CO2 deep down into the earth, okay, like 2 miles into the earth. And that's how they put it away for good. And it sounds, okay, well, we'll put it away and it won't come out probably. But if it does, the problem is that there are water tables that it could affect, that people in communities are drinking from. I mean, we can't have it. There could be seismic activity. We're just not exactly sure of what that's going to look like. Okay, so we have to examine these solutions. And so where we're looking at climate change solutions, we need to find the ones that are least impactful in a negative way against certain people. And it's not something that just benefits oil companies, because unfortunately, hey, oil companies have their place in society. I'm not even making a statement about that right now, but oil companies control this injection process, and I'm not sure if that's the best thing for all of us. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Beth, I also wanted to go back to something you said earlier about investing sort of our lawmakers in this process. And if you had like a magic wand or a roadmap you would want lawmakers to follow in the fight against climate change, I'm wondering what that roadmap would look like for you.
That's a great question. Okay, so a roadmap to fight against climate change. Well, there's got to be, right now, the government is providing certain incentives and funding for, technologies, et cetera, to reduce emissions and that sort of thing. What they might not be doing is doing enough to, they might be, well, I hate to say this, but I think the oil companies probably have a very strong impact on what's happening. Okay, because a lot of those incentives go to the oil companies for mitigating and putting CO2 down in the ground. For instance, what some of the oil companies are doing is capturing CO2 and they put it underground to try to extract more oil. Okay, it's a means for extracting more oil. So what the government needs to do is get real about some of those incentives and solutions that aren't necessarily serving their people. They might be serving the bottom line for the oil companies, and there might be a place for that, but until we're pulling down enough CO2 and we're really taking care of the problem, then I don't think they should benefit all from that, if what they're doing is extracting more oil, because it kind of adds to the problem, right? So but what a roadmap, I'm not sure. Like, I think I used to do this, is I used to take high school students in to lobby, because I'm a lawyer also, and I like to stick it to the man whenever I can. But I like to, no, it's not that, but I really want to teach young people that they have a voice. Okay. And so just in a practical sense, it's not hard to get your voice heard, because from your lawmakers, like if you were to call your lawmaker and say, I'm concerned about climate change and I want to see more carbon removal technologies implemented. Well, that one phone call, someone is going to have to note that you called, that you're a resident in that district of that lawmaker, and you care about that. And there's a number that they've said, okay, there's one person, and then they think for that one person, there must be 100 other people that feel that way. Okay. So they're putting a formula to it. Okay. So it really does count when you go and visit with your lawmaker. It counts more if you visit with them. but it still counts if you just make a call, send a letter, send an email. They have to count it. That's what they do in those offices. So I would say it's kind of as simple as that. That's a starting point for doing something.
Yeah, and Beth, I'm also curious to ask you about your background as a lawyer and how it helps you to do sort of this advocacy work with climate change. So how much does your legal background help you in your work with climate change as well?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Well, my husband and I are both lawyers as well. And we have a law firm and that's kind of at the heart of what we do. And he's a patent lawyer. So patent lawyers are, they have to be scientists in order to become a patent lawyer. And so in what we specialize in our law firm is protection of intellectual property. So patents, trade secrets, that kind of thing. So that's very important when you're developing technology, or else someone's going to come steal it, and they might steal it anyway. I mean, it certainly has happened. We've had to sue one of the large auto manufacturers, and we did it, based on they came in, they just patented our technology. And not only did they patent it, I mean, we had an application for a patent, but it hadn't reached the patent stage. And what they did is they came and copied our patent. And the way that we know they copied it is because word for word, it was in their patent application. And even the mistakes that we made were in theirs. So that we know they copied it. I mean, they just lifted it. And because they're a big, huge auto manufacturer, Toyota, then they just patented them instead of us. And so that will happen. And we had to have the means to fight it. And we did. And we've won a number of patent lawsuits against Toyota for that reason. Excuse me 1 second. I got a call. So it helps to protect, our innovation. And then with regard to advocacy, obviously you might see that I'm not really afraid to state my opinion about things. And really, if you care about something, you don't have to be a lawyer to do that. Maybe law gave me the confidence to go and advocate to members of Congress and that sort of thing. But, I've seen sixth graders do it just as well. It's not hard. And really, those people are working for us and they need to listen to us. And so, I think it's helped me have the incentive and the drive to do it, but anyone can do that. You don't have to be a lawyer.
Yeah, Beth, I always say that we make time in life for the things we prioritize, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly.
It's all about making it a priority, and I can see that you have done that. So, Beth, my final question for you today has to do with your own personal and professional legacy and how you want that to be defined.
My personal life history, is that what you said?
Legacy, yeah.
Oh, legacy?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I hope that when people look back on my life and my legacy, I hope what they see is inclusiveness, compassion, and effectiveness. None of that matters if you're not really effective. So you've got to have something good. And we have like a really good technology. And so it's important that we put our forces behind it. But I don't want to leave anyone behind. And I don't care about people within our borders or, United States more than people in Africa or whatever. I think everyone matters as much as everybody else. And we're all in this together, especially with climate change. And so I hope that people look back on what we did and realize that we care about everyone, even people who don't care about climate change. I care about them. And I want to do this for everybody because we got something good. And when you have that, then, I want to make it a success.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, climate change can certainly be a unifying force, can't it?
It's like an asteroid heading for Earth, you know? I mean, what are we going to do? Deny it? That doesn't help anything. But we all
Well,
need to come together, you know? It doesn't matter whether you're on the other side of the world or whether you're here or whether you're, you know, or whether you're a woman or whether you're disabled or whether you're, you know, whatever. It's we all matter and we all count and we all got to be in this thing together. And I hope that people look back on that, on my life and my legacy and say, you know, she cared about all that and she got the job done.
it's all interconnected, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Well, Ben, I want to thank you for your tremendous work in the fighting against climate change. I want to thank you for your advocacy work and your fierce dedication to this issue. And I also want to thank you for engaging in conversation with me this afternoon. It's most appreciated.
Well, it's been a pleasure and thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it very much.